Welcome to the Voice of Retail podcast. My name is Michael LeBlanc, and I am your host. I believe in the power of storytelling to bring the retail industry to life. I'll bring insights, perspectives, and experiences from some of the retail industry's most innovative and influential voices each week. This podcast is produced in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. Award-winning digital marketing mavens and Reshift Media founders Kirk and Steve Buors join me on the podcast with the latest strategies and tactics in digital and social marketing for retailers. We delve deep and understand how the modern privacy landscape has impacted the use of tools such as Meta and Tik Tok, the evolution of the latest generation of platforms such as YouTube Shorts, Reels, online streaming commerce, and first-party data. Last but not least, my good friends share the fantastic news that Reshift Media has been voted the world's best franchise marketing firm by Global Franchise Awards. Let's listen in now. Well, gentlemen, welcome to the Voice of Retail podcast. How are you doing this morning? Kirk, how are you?
I'm doing great, Mike, and thanks for having us.
Steve, this is a return visit for you. Kirk, this is your first time on the podcast, amazingly. Steve, how are you?
Very good. Thanks for having me again, Mike. I'm happy to be invited back.
Well, listen, the three of us have known each other for a long, long time, so this is I'm really looking forward to our time today, and you guys got a big announcement. We'll get to that a bit later, some fantastic achievements. I want to get to that later. I'll leave that as a teaser for the audience. But first of all, let's talk about you guys. So again, I know you really well, but not everyone does. So Kirk, tell us about a bit about yourself, and then what you do, and a bit of your background.
Sure. Well, maybe I'll just kind of go back 10, 15 years ago when I was in the traditional media business, in particular newspapers. And I was heading up sales for, at the time, CanWest and then Post Media, and responsible for advertising sales in both the newspapers and also digitally, so all of the digital assets. And about 10 years ago was when we started seeing the decline, maybe 11 years ago, in newspaper ad revenue. And Steve and I got together and talked about building this model, which would be a digital ad agency that would focus on social media, search, web development, and apps, and that sort of thing. So anything to do with digital, because we saw the decline in newspaper revenue, and that wasn't coming back. So we actually went to market, built this business 10 and a half years ago. I guess it's 11 years this spring. And we haven't looked back ever since. So we do everything from social media, search, both organic, paid, websites. We deal with lots of retailers and lots of franchise systems, not only in Canada, but in the US and around the world. So we've got about 200 customers in 20 countries around the world today. We started with none, and here we are today. We've built a really solid business, and we're having a lot of fun.
And how big is the team now? I mean, and are you remote? I've been to your offices pre-pandemic, but talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, great question. So March 2020, we were in this beautiful office down near the Distillery District. I think you were in it, Mike.
Yeah.
We're on the top floor, skylights, open concept, though.
The world is our oyster. Everything's great.
It was fabulous. It was a beautiful office. We renovated it. Very proud of it. But it was open office concept. And when COVID hit, so on the, whatever that Friday was, the 13th or 14th or whatever of March, we said, okay, well, we're going to have to close the office for a couple of weeks because of COVID. And, 4 months later, we're still working from home. And fast forward to September of 2020, and we actually bought out our lease. And we were in the year one or 6 month of a 5-year lease. So we bought out our lease and said, you know what, this isn't going away anytime soon. We'll work from home and then we'll reevaluate. So here we are 3 years later, almost, I guess, this month. And we are a remote company. We all work from home. It's going extremely well. And, we have a daily call at 10 o'clock. And everyone's on that call. And from there, the teams, go off into different directions. We're a team of about 30 right now. Depends on the day. I think 31 tomorrow, but 30 today. We've got a great team. And tomorrow, in fact, we're doing a team building event, and we're going tubing up at Barrie with the team and have some fun on the slopes. So we're doing things like that to try to make sure we get together at least every few months in person.
I mean, the what I hear most from retailers, executives, people like yourself, business leaders from yourself, is that remote work's very good for productivity, but you really have to be thoughtful about creating a team together. I mean, you are a master team builder, so I think lots of people would look to you to lessons to how to keep cohesion and attachment and everyone going in the same direction. So you're envisioning doing more of these team building things, but not necessarily all together, 8 hours a day, but kind of find these opportunities. Yeah, that's the kind of the plan you're thinking about.
Exactly. Tomorrow will be at 3:00. We'll do some tubing from 3 to 5. We'll go for a beer or a glass of wine and some dinner afterwards. And then everyone goes home, and we're back at it Friday morning.
Right.
So we're going to do things like axe throwing and curling, and we rented a boat for like in last June where we toured the Toronto Islands.
Yeah.
So stuff like that, because a lot of our team, Mike, haven't met each other in person because they've been hired, during the pandemic, and people who were hired 2 months ago haven't met anyone on the team. So this will be their first time meeting people.
Wow. All right, Steve, Kirk's been hogging the mic. Your turn. Your voice and name would be very familiar to the listeners. You've been on the stage many times at Retail Council of Canada events and in the industry. But take a step back, Steve. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you two came into thinking about how you were going to focus the organization from both a technology and from a product perspective. What were you going to go to market with?
Yeah, it's funny to look back, actually, because it feels like 100 years ago, but also just yesterday. So Kirk and I actually worked together at CanWest and Post Media. So while he was leading the sales team, I was on the digital side. So I was kind of building the products and he was selling them. And we worked together incredibly well over multiple years in corporate life. And so, as Kirk said, when we started to see that, maybe this traditional media thing wasn't going as in the direction we wanted it to, I remember very vividly saying to Kirk, "It's time to stop being on defense and go on offense for a while." And so,
nor was CanWest going in the direction we wanted it to. By the way, that's how for the listeners, that's how we all know each other. We all worked at CanWest. We intersected at that point.
Yeah, exactly. Those were interesting times, to say the least.
Yes.
So, over a drink, Kirk and I talked about the dream of an agency.
Yeah.
We got some private investors who took a bit of a chance on a couple of guys who, were first-time entrepreneurs. I give massive credit to my friend Kirk here, who became an entrepreneur, post 40 years old, which is quite unusual, I would say. And we had no clients, but we had a dream of creating an agency and being, the biggest agency in Canada for retailers and franchise systems and restaurant chains. And, the rest is history. 10 years in, we got a great team and we're having a lot of fun. Well,
shout out to our good friend Arturo, who was kind of the galvanizing glue that brought us all together, if he's listening. Let me ask you this question. As you reflect back on those days, Steve, when you think about the direction that media was going, did things pan out the way you thought they would, or were there any surprises as you think about it? I mean, it was clear the classifieds were going to get annihilated one way, shape, or another, though the papers had some, that was their core business. They had some ways to continue to go after it. But did anything unravel the way you were you surprised at anything that happened since you've left, let's call that the traditional media business and their attempts to go in digital?
I would love to say I've been surprised. Unfortunately, I haven't really. Classifieds, you hit the nail on the head. That one, we saw that coming. Craigslist back in the day was the first sort of threat, and then obviously Kijiji in Canada. And we saw the writing on the wall. In fact, I remember we made some trips overseas because there were some newspaper groups in Europe who had successfully transitioned to digital. And the real way they did that was they went free very rapidly. And in Canada, obviously, it was a very lucrative revenue model in classifieds. And so it was hard for the organization to get their heads wrapped around a free model for something that they've been paid for a very, very long time. So classifieds decline was predictable and unfortunately happened faster, I think, than probably most traditional organizations would have expected.
It was like the frog in the boiling water, right? Slowly, but then suddenly.
Yeah, I completely agree. You're right. We saw erosion, and then suddenly it just fell off a cliff. And then, online CPMs. Back in the day, I don't know if you remember the $50 CPMs we once earned, but those days are long gone.
Those days are long gone.
Yeah. So, and to this day, I don't believe there's a newsroom anywhere in the world that could fund itself with its online revenue. Still, I think the New York Times is close, but It's
Wall Street Journal. Maybe the Wall Street Journal does pretty good, but it's hard to say, right?
Well, they got their subscription models that they do for sure. Yeah.
Kirk, let's talk about. Let's take a step back. Let's talk about you just telling me off mic. You just got back from Vegas and hitting that little white ball down the fairway, but you didn't go to Vegas to play golf. You can go to a bunch of places to play golf. What were you doing in Vegas? And tell us about your award. It's fantastic news.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. So. We were down there for the International Franchise Association Convention. It's an annual convention, about 4,000 people, a combination of franchisors, some franchisees, and suppliers. And prior to that convention, there is another company, the Global Franchise Awards. So this is an international company that has the different franchise associations from Australia and the UK and Canada and the US who get together and have a number of categories where they ask people to enter, and they're voted on, and then they announce it on the night prior to the actual convention. So we entered for the best franchise marketing firm. Mm-hmm. And we found out about 2 weeks prior that we were finalists, which was very exciting. And quite honestly, when we entered this, we go, this might be a bit of a long shot for us, but I think we can. We have a good story to tell.
Now, to be clear, just so I'm clear, you entered marketing firm, not digital marketing firm, right? It's marketing firm, right?
Correct.
Right. That's a big pool. It's a big pool of competition.
Well said. You're absolutely correct. So it was franchise marketing firm. And so, a couple of weeks out, we found out we're finalists. That's fantastic. They sent us a badge. We can use it in our social media. We can put it on our website. And then on the Saturday night, we win the actual award. Honestly, it's the biggest award we could have ever dreamed of winning. And right after that, so the following day, and we had our team down. So we had our management team down. We had, our CTO. We had our vice president of search, our vice president of social media, our creative director, and Steve and myself. And it was really, really a team effort. And without the team, we wouldn't have won this award, of course. So it's really, thanks to the team that we won the award. And then the days following at the actual convention, people were coming up to us, "Hey, we hear you won this award." And it turns out we were the first Canadian company to win the award. So, and with a very nice organization. They sent us pictures. There's an interview that was done. We don't have that yet. There's a magazine coming out with a summary of all of the winners. And we're honored and pleasantly surprised.
Well, I in one way, I'd call it a great capstone to 10 years of the business, but in other ways, you guys ain't done yet. So it's no capstone. It's just another milestone, I think I would phrase it. So, congratulations. It's
thanks, Mike.
Great to see your success. All right, Steve, let's transition to talk about Tradecraft for a little bit. Listen, 10 years, my God, lots of change. So let's not make this a history lesson, but, since you guys have started, and even since, COVID, post-COVID, lots of new players in the game, new clients, top platforms. What's on your mind when it comes to what you're thinking about the players in the games and the landscape? I talk to retailers and analysts who say, listen, it's tough to win the way you used to in search. It's more like a utility than, the differentiator became table stakes. What's your experience with your clients around when you go to talk to them about how to win in these areas? Or is there winning, or is there just, listen, you got to be there and we'll try to find different ways to go at it? Talk about that for a bit.
Absolutely. And you can still win, but I would agree that the playing field keeps changing. I liken it to golf where, you can be a great golfer, but you're playing a different course every day. So you got to be able to adjust to the conditions. A big thing, looking back over 10 years is just that transition from, you used to be able to do so much organic social media. You had great reach and you could do great branding and you could really grow a business. Organic search, which is still big, obviously, but it was really more visible on your phone than it is today with how they've arranged the search advertising. So there's been a major shift to a pay to play sort of model on search and on social in particular. I think we all know today that although you need to have a Facebook page and an Instagram handle, your ability to get organic reach is nothing compared to what it used to be. And if you really want to be successful, you got to put some dollars behind it.
Yeah. YouTube as well. What do you, I mean, that's been my personal experience with YouTube with my cooking show. The algorithm doesn't work to drive. What works is advertising. Is that consistent with your experience? Or is there a way to get more out of platforms like YouTube? Like, there's still ways to be successful, but as you say, you need to amplify it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You can always be successful in a niche depending on the level of competition you have, and obviously the amount of views you're getting and likes and subscriptions, etc. But what most people don't realize is, to get there, you kind of have to prime the pump. So you don't just throw up a YouTube channel or an Instagram page and wait for the fans to roll in. You have to start somewhere. And the way you start is by getting some promotion, and you have to pay YouTube, you have to pay Instagram and Facebook to get that first sort of bump. Once you get some momentum, you can certainly have a little more success. And once you build that audience to a degree, you can have more success. But across the board, it doesn't matter which platform we're talking with these days. It's about monetization for sure.
I get these emails all the time, unsolicited emails from people around the world saying, I'm an expert in YouTube or whatever. I'm an expert in Facebook and Instagram, and I will drive your sales organically. Is this just a hustle? I mean, is there ways to game it? That I've heard there's ways to game YouTube, for example, that if you get caught, you're in trouble. Is that something that you see around? I wouldn't call it in any way your competition, but is this something that your clients see and go, hey, this guy from wherever promises to drive my thing, and you say you can't do it? What do you think about that?
We get forwarded those emails from our clients. It's like, hey, this guy says he can do it. Yeah, I get those emails too. Like, I can't tell you how often I get someone emailing me saying, I can make reshiftmedia.com have better SEO. I'm like, yeah, good luck with that. If you could do that, that would be quite a feat. Those are just spam emails. And yes, of course, there's always a way to game a system. There always is. But Google, Facebook, all these companies have armies of people who are actively looking for that, both using technology and bots, but also using actual people. And we've seen a real increase. As we all know, there's been some legal scrutiny and political scrutiny, particularly in the U.S. with Facebook in particular, but across the board. And we've seen a real crackdown in terms of these platforms looking for people trying to game the system, even on advertising. You can't even pay for certain things anymore because the platforms are getting themselves in some hot water. So you might have some short-term success if you manage to find some little trick or some fake clicks or things like that, but it's always short-lived.
Is LinkedIn the last bastion of anything like organic growth? I mean, I like LinkedIn and it does seem to have a good audience. Is that maybe the last bastion of some opportunity for success in organic?
No, I wouldn't say that. LinkedIn is great in specific verticals for sure. Obviously, yourself, Mike, in your business, I could see LinkedIn being magnificent. Anyone who's in recruitment or any kind of sales position probably loves LinkedIn. Anything outside of that, LinkedIn doesn't have as much stickiness. But we're seeing great results on TikTok as an example. It's obviously skews much younger, but the level of commitment people have to using TikTok is quite astounding in terms of the time spent, the number of times they open it a day. So organic reach on some platforms is still quite good, particularly if they're a newish platform. But what invariably happens is once they get scale and once they get to a certain level of sophistication, it flips over to paid again. So
we got you now. We got you now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Kirk, let's transition to talk about privacy. And I'm sure this is something you hear from both your existing clients and prospective clients. I mean, we really had an incident not too long ago where the Canadian government tagged a Canadian retailer with Meta for some privacy breaches, not privacy breaches, but some behaviors that weren't positive. Let's pull these two thoughts together. Can social media marketing still be as effective as it ever was? And how do you think about the privacy, I don't want to say privacy breaches, but the privacy concerns that seem to be escalating, and are the platforms really paying attention? And is it your job? Do you consider your job to look out for your clients' best interests when you're dealing with these big platforms?
Well, it was kind of out of control, to be honest. It was a bit of the Wild West, and especially in Canada now, it's much more controlled. Where if we are going to upload a customer list into Facebook to create a custom audience, you have to have approval. That has to be a list that has the customers have opted in for. So
that was the nub of the issue, right? The approval, it can't be buried in page 32 of the T's and C's, right? I mean, that's really what the government said in its recent ruling, right? Is that a fair statement?
It is, and you have to have implicit proof. Like you have to have backup that person on this day gave us authorization to converse with them, to follow up and send out promotional messages and that sort of thing.
It's an interesting. Let me follow that thread. I mean, are you going to say to someone, "Hey, by the way, subscribe to my email list, and I'm going to give that email list, by the way, to Meta, who's going to create more marketing for me"? Are you okay with that? I think that, as you said, it was the Wild West that was happening. But are we at that point where you need to be that precise about your declarations? I mean, who would want to opt into that list then? I mean, right?
Well, put it this way: first-party data is the best data you can have. So,
and define that for the listeners, just to make sure everybody knows what
so that means. Someone has explicitly agreed for you to communicate with them once they've signed up for an email or a newsletter.
Like a retailer's in-house list. And we would call it an in-house list, basically, right?
Right. So you have to have that authorization if you are going to communicate with them in any way, whether it's an email blast, even Facebook, they actually, when you go to upload a list, there's a disclaimer, and Steve, maybe you know what the disclaimer says better than I, but it actually says, do you have approval to use this list in marketing? So they actually, as an agency, we always make sure that this has been an approved list. It's compliant with CASL here in Canada. So we always make sure, because we don't want to be the ones who are called on the carpet for using a list that hasn't been approved. So as an agency, it is our place and our role to make sure that we aren't, violating any rules. So we're very, very careful about that. But at the end of the day, is it ever as effective as it once was? Well, I would say this, that first-party data is your conversion rates are probably much higher with that type of a client than just this big blast out to the world.
Sure, that's always been the case, though. I mean, really, if you think about it, right? Like buying back in our day, buy a list of emails that they were very unproductive, but they were cheap.
Well, that's a really good point. In the U.S. right now, the laws aren't as tight, so you can buy a list and blast away. Whereas in Canada, like, people will call you out on it. If you email them and they didn't sign up, you actually hear back.
What's your that's an interesting point. What's your experience in the U.S.? Is it still the case that you can do these bulk emails and be successful at scale, because they just have a much bigger scale, I guess? Is it still a tactic that you employ with your U.S. clients?
Well, it's a great question. So our conversion rates in Canada are, in terms of form completions or whatever the call to action is in Canada, are much greater than the U.S., simply because it's already a pre-approved list. So the people you're reaching out to have agreed to converse with you. In the US, yes, it's 10, 15 times the amount of emails, but the conversion rates are lower because they haven't actually agreed to converse with you. So, you've got bigger volume, and the ruling isn't as strict, but the conversion rates on a percentage basis aren't as good.
Except in California, right? I mean, not to get into the nuances, but I think California is more like Castle in Canada. Steve, let's talk a little bit more broadly, from search to online live stream commerce to this nonsense of the metaverse. What are the prospects for the rest of the year? Where are you pointing your clients, and what are you talking to them about as you think about 2023 and beyond? What's the priorities for you and that you're advising your clients?
Well, the number one thing actually Kirk just hit on is first party data. So privacy is gaining more and more momentum. Obviously, Apple's been very active in the past couple of years, as we all know. But even all of your major browsers, Safari and Firefox have already severely limited third-party cookies. Chrome is saying they're going to be doing the same by 2024. So what that means is any kind of third-party data system you're using that's based on third-party data cookies is basically going the way of the dodo. So the big piece of work we've been doing with our clients for the last couple of years, and it certainly has a huge push in 2023, is to make sure we've actually thought through a good first-party data approach. So how are you gathering information from your clients? How are you storing it securely so you don't have any kind of privacy breaches, data breaches? And then what are you doing with it? Is it just marketing messaging? Is it product improvement? Is it ongoing surveys? So we've been doing a lot of work in that regard to make sure that come 2024, 2025, our clients aren't being disadvantaged. Anyone who's relying exclusively on platform-based targeting, interest-based, or even audience-based targeting, but without the first-party data, they're going to see a major degradation in their performance in the next couple of years, without question.
Interesting. Kirk, last question to you, which is, you are often the face or the voice of the agency. When you're talking to clients or prospective clients, and when you're in Vegas, people coming up to you to congratulate you and then say, hey, what do you guys do for a living? What are the top three things they're asking for most often? Like, do they have they come in and they say, listen, that's a myth. This is the reality. And when they come up and talk to you about, here, we're looking for somebody that can help us with this. We have this problem. What are you hearing most often?
Well, that's a great question, Mike. So, if we look back to last year, and it still continues into this year, it's e-com. Can you guys bolt e-com onto my website? Because they realize that brick and mortar is not the only way to go. So yes, we can, and we do. We've probably added e-com to more websites in the last 2 years than we've done ever. So that's certainly one. But
just let me follow up on that. What platform do you have a choice of platforms that you use? Do you look to one to the other? Is it case specific? How do you think about that?
Well, there's so many options. So the platform we typically build our websites on, our WordPress, and then they've got different plugins like WooCommerce. There's also things like Shopify. So there's depends on what the client is trying to achieve, and are they part of the delivery? Are they not? So we have to understand what their objectives are first before we actually suggest a platform. But often it could be, if it's an existing website, could be a plugin like WooCommerce that we'd add on. But they all think it can happen within a week. Hey, can we have that for next week?
We go, that's the story, right? Hey, it's in the cloud. Just pull it down from the cloud and hook it up, right?
Yeah, it can't be difficult.
Yeah.
But often, Mike, and shockingly, is they haven't thought about fulfillment and process internally at their own company. So you can add it on, but they haven't thought about, okay, how does this work? How do orders get taken in? How does inventory get managed? Does the local retailer closest to that location get credit for the sale? Like little things like that come up.
It's a big deal in the franchise world, right? I mean, the franchise world that you guys, I don't know, would you say primarily play in, or certainly a big focus?
Multi-location businesses, franchise probably being the biggest, but retail in general, for sure.
And there's a tension sometimes between franchise and franchisor when it comes to e-commerce, right? Who gets the sale? Who's getting most of the sale? How do you guys think of that? Do you often get asked, how can we do this? How do we both win? How do the franchisees win, and how do the franchisors win?
Well, you see a lot of different models. Typically, they like to somehow include the franchisee that they're getting, either pick the product up at their store in some cases, or they're getting
credit for the sale or something.
Credited for the sale. So that's most common. I would say the ones who don't do that get a lot of heat from their franchisees. Yeah, so that's been a very popular one. The other one is AI. So, everyone's talking about, hey, I should be an AI. Can't I be using this, chat GPT? And it certainly has its place. And I think we're just at we're at the tip of the iceberg on this. There is so many applications for chat GPT and AI in general. And I think you still need to have human intervention, and that's what a lot of people don't realize. So that's another very, very popular one. And then the last one, Mike, would be what's TikTok? Why aren't we on TikTok? They always want my kids are on TikTok, so why aren't we on TikTok? So it's always that shiny new digital marketing platform. And Steve touched on this earlier, but that comes up all the time. And then we'll talk to them and we go, well, for example, in Canada, Mike, and TikTok's a really good example. For a retailer or for a franchise system, you can only target as low as city level, and they only have 25 cities they can target in Canada. So you can't get down to the postal code. You can't get down to the neighborhood. So, a big part of our focus at Reshift Media is hyper-local targeting when it comes to, organic, but also paid. And that's part of our secret sauce is we'll get better results because we're not going to waste your ad dollars. We're going to be targeting whether it's a postal code or postal codes or a 5-kilometer radius around your locations, but you can't do that with some platforms. So
and very important when you're working in a franchisee system, right? I got my trading area, I got my fellow franchisee is got a different trading area, but we can't run the same TikToks in Toronto or whatever, something that broad, right? That kind of big broad brush is a bit too. Yeah. What are you hearing about? I just want to follow up on that. What are you hearing about the YouTube Shorts? I see more and more of them coming up. I've heard it from a couple of retailers they say it's growing. Is that the next thing? Really TikTok exploded this short form video idea. Reels, Meta came in with Reels, and now YouTube's got some plans. On YouTube, you can target pretty precisely, right?
You can better. So short form video is certainly hot right now. There's no doubt about it. It performs better, whether it's on Facebook, Instagram, obviously TikTok. Also, pre-rolls, mid-rolls, and end of roll when it comes to YouTube.
Jelly rolls, whatever. Yeah. Egg rolls, whatever. Yeah.
It's absolutely, short form video performs very, very well, regardless of the platform. To be honest, and
now when you say perform, is that for views? And I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but when you say perform, my experience with TikTok, I had 600,000-700,000 views on one of my TikToks for my barbecue show.
Wow.
But I saw no lift whatsoever in the show metrics. But it's good to have a big audience. But is it good at converting, or is it just way up in the funnel for awareness and fun?
Well, that's a really good point, Mike. It's brand awareness. And, you're not getting people filling in a form or, ordering something right from a TikTok. But, in your case, there's probably no call to action anyhow. Buy Mike's,
watch the video,
sauce.
Watch the full video. That my hope from a mechanism like that would be just watch the longer form video where I hope to monetize and, that kind of thing.
But at the same time, if you look at something like, Instagram or TikTok, people are selling product. Through those platforms. But you've got to have a call to action, but it's certainly, there are certainly platforms that can convert, whether it's sell product, fill in a form, they all have, I guess, depends on the category too, right? Like fashion does very, very well. Food does very, very well on Instagram, but other products, not so much. But amazingly, Mike, today, Facebook and Instagram, because of that local nature, and if you're a retailer or a franchise system, having local Facebook pages still perform very, very well because of that local nature that they have. And the whole shop local plays right into that.
Right.
Whereas, something like a TikTok or Snapchat just don't have, it's just not a local play today.
Yeah.
So a little bit more in the US, actually, the targeting is better. You don't want to talk about TikTok that they can't go below city level. They can in the US, but not in Canada.
If people want to get in touch with your agency, Steve, where do they go? Get in touch with Kirk, get in touch with yourself. I mean, you're a font of wisdom when it comes to these things. Where do they go and how do they get in touch?
Best place to go is reshiftmedia.com. We got all of our contact information on there. Great blog if you're interested in keeping up with what's going on in digital media on an ongoing basis. And you can certainly get in touch with myself or Kirk right through our website there.
Fantastic. Well, gentlemen, thanks for joining me on the mic. Once again, congratulations on your great achievement and winning a fantastic award. Again, it's not a capstone, but just another milestone. So I'm sure great things ahead for you and for your clients. So once again, thanks for joining me on the Voice of Retail podcast. Real treat catching up, and I look forward to seeing you in person real soon.
Thanks for having us, Mike. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of The Voice of Retail. If you haven't already, be sure and follow on your favorite podcast platform so new episodes will land automatically each week. And be sure to check out my other retail industry media properties, Remarkable Retail Podcast with Steve Dennis, and the Global E-Commerce Leaders Podcast. Last but not least, if you're into barbecue, check out my YouTube barbecue show, Last Request Barbecue, with new episodes each and every week. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc, consumer growth consultant, president of Emmy LeBlanc and Company Inc., Mavens Media, and keynote speaker. If you're looking for more content or want to chat, follow me on LinkedIn or visit my website at meleblanc.co. Safe travels, everyone.